Good morning, everyone. I'm David Snyder, President and CEO of the Economic Club of Chicago. And thank you for joining us for today's program focusing on the future of collegiate athletics. On the eve of March Madness, we are fortunate to have with us two of the most powerful figures in college athletics. Nina King, Duke University's Vice President and Director of Athletics, and Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren. Nina has held various roles in Duke's athletic department over the past 13 years and took over as athletic director last September, becoming the university's first woman and first African American to hold that position. With an accounting degree from Notre Dame and a law degree from Tulane, she also teaches an MBA-level sports business class at Duke's Fuqua School of Business. She joins us today from Durham as the number 9 ranked Duke preps for the ACC and NCAA playoffs. In 2019, Kevin Warren was named commissioner of the 126-year-old athletic conference, one of the most storied in college sports. He was named commissioner after spending 21 seasons in the NFL, including running business operations for the then St. Louis Rams, Detroit Lions, and most recently as COO of the Minnesota Vikings. There, he was the highest-ranking black business executive in the NFL prior to becoming the first African American to run the Big Ten. Kevin was a championship basketball player at his alma mater, Grand Canyon University, and then he went on to get his MBA at Arizona State University, and like Nina, has a Notre Dame connection, having received his law degree there before becoming a practicing attorney. Kevin joins us today from Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, just moments before the tip-off of the Big Ten's women's basketball tournament. And we're so fortunate to have as our moderator Jon Frankel, the Emmy Award-winning correspondent for HBO's Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel. Jon is well known for his intelligent and unique reporting of athletics, including recent coverage of the changing economics of college sports. He has had a rich career as both a reporter and anchor at ABC, CBS, NBC, and now HBO. Jon will begin the program with a few opening comments to frame today's discussion before beginning his conversation with Kevin and Nina. Kevin, Nina, and Jon, thank you for being here today. And Jon, I hand things over to you.
All right, David, thank you so very much. Kevin, Nina, thank you guys for making time for us. Let me frame it this way. I'm the only one here who does not have a graduate degree, so I'm at a disadvantage to begin with. I also don't have the deep pockets that college athletics has today. Let me start with it this way and ask you both to finish the sentence. I know that sounds sort of elementary, but I'll give you each an opportunity. Maybe it's a softball to start with. Your headline is this: college athletics is in, and finish the sentence for me. Nina?
A state of transformation. Want me to keep expanding past the sentence?
Please
or do we go period and Commissioner Warren?
No, go ahead. I'll give you a little leeway. There's no time limit here.
Sure. Yeah, we saw recently with the NCAA hosting a constitutional convention, a desire to rework kind of the NCAA as an organization. And out of the constitutional convention, we have a revised constitution and now an NCAA committee, transformation committee, to really do a deep dive into what do we look like as an organization and how do we move forward and be a more modern, perhaps nimble organization. And so it's an exciting time. Sure, there are a lot of issues, things that we are dealing with day to day relative to college athletics and how we operate. But just kind of going back to finishing the sentence, we are in a state of transformation, and college athletics is changing.
Kevin, you can either pick up on that thought or come up with your own altogether. College athletics is in?
I would say in a state of transition, but with a backdrop of great opportunities from a transformational standpoint, very similar to what Nina has said. This is a great time to be in college athletics. This is the first time in many years, and I go back to even when I was a student athlete in the mid to late 80s, that there really is an opportunity for leadership to be displayed, for true transformation to occur. And I truly believe that the decisions that individuals like Nina, myself, and others that will make now will have an impact for the next 50 to 100 years in college athletics. So I know it's something that we both take seriously. We accept the challenge, and we look forward to being on the forefront of leading into qualitative and quantitative change in college athletics.
As Nina said before we embarked on this in front of everybody, that we could probably spend 4 days doing this and we still wouldn't scratch the surface. When you talk about transformational opportunities, I could dive in right there and say, does that mean for the universities, the athletic teams specifically? Does that mean for the student athlete and some of the progress that we've seen over the last year or couple of years? But let me go back to this, since we're starting with the economics as a framework here. It would seem to the outsider that college athletics is in a very healthy economic position. Would you agree with that?
Well,
Either one
I'll
of you can
start.
jump in.
Sure. Running a collegiate athletics program is a business. We are an interesting business encapsulated in academia in a nonprofit enterprise. It is an expensive endeavor, but it is all about providing the very best experience for our student athletes. And so, we make decisions relative to what we're spending our money on, always starting off with the question, what is in the best interests of the student athletes, and how do we enhance their experience here at Duke? Duke is an expensive operation. I mean, our scholarships are approaching $80,000 total cost of attendance. And within athletics, we pay sticker price to the university for each scholarship, each grant and aid that we provide for our student athletes. And so starting off with $80,000 per, and that financial aid bill is big. And so, we're certainly trying to match the revenues then to be able to pay for the student athlete experience. And so while it can appear that the money is flowing and we're very healthy, I would say, again, just speaking in my position sitting in this chair here at Duke, that it is a challenging endeavor, just trying to keep up with renovating facilities and, again, providing as many resources as possible for the student athletes to have a really elite academic and athletic experience. It's expensive.
And it's interesting, and perhaps if I put this question to you, I didn't want to put Nina in the position of, having sour grapes and crying for more money. In theory, at least at the Power 5 level, and obviously we're seeing things change between the Big Five and the rest of the athletic departments across the country. But it would seem, at least by definition, that everybody should be on an equal playing field, right? That Duke could go up and play Michigan State or Illinois or Indiana in football, basketball, softball, any other sport. But the fact is that there's, here's Kevin representing the Big Ten Conference. You're at the ACC. You're at an ACC school, and there's a huge revenue gap. And Kevin, maybe you can speak to this. I'm going to quote some numbers that come out of a publication on the West Coast. That it said for fiscal year 21, or let me use fiscal year 22. The estimates are that the Big Ten will pay out 58, just shy of 60 million per school, and the ACC will be at about 35 million. And if you look ahead to the totals over between 21 and 24, that number is going to grow, and the Big Ten will have a $250 million payout to schools, and the ACC will be 146 million. Is that an equal playing field?
Well, I mean, one of the things that was most exciting when I joined the Big Ten was the fact that I had spent my prior 21 years in a very capitalistic environment in the National Football League, which I learned so very much. And to this day, and every time I get an opportunity to thank them, I do. Just the Will family, as you alluded to during the introduction, was to afford me, especially a Black man, an opportunity to run all of their businesses in Minnesota for 15 years was truly a blessing. So I came into college athletics understanding of the importance and need, as Nina alluded to, of making sure that every decision we make is in the best interest of our student athletes. And that's the way that I start my morning in prayer. We have nearly 10,000 student athletes, and I pray for the strength and the wisdom and the tenacity to make sure that every decision that I make, that we make collectively, is with the student athlete, in mind. And from a financial standpoint, I think one of the things that we saw these last couple of years is that although we work in an enterprise that are from a not-for-profit standpoint, but we still have to operate our individual business units, whether you're at an institution, an incredible institution, a fine institution like Duke University, that Nina is leading that athletic department, or whether you're at a conference, level. These are businesses. And so I'm very focused on making sure that we run it like a business. And you saw some of the financial strains that many institutions or entities in college athletics face when we were dealing with COVID. And so I've always had the finances top of mind from an operational standpoint, but it's done from a context of making sure that we have the appropriate resources to provide everything that's relevant, that's necessary, and that's imperative to our student athletes. And that's why we're leaning into social justice issues and mental health and wellness issues and investing in data and analytics. Because although we're in a not-for-profit setting, this is a business enterprise, and I always make sure that I keep the health, safety, wellness, and the future of our student athletes at the center of every single decision that we make in the Big Ten Conference.
You touched on a couple things that I'd like to come back to, but when you both speak about the priority being the health and wellness of the student athlete, how do you prioritize that with remaining competitive and keeping the revenues streaming so that you can stay competitive? I mean, if you had to rank those things, I know you're going to tell me that you have told me that the health and wellness of the student athlete comes first, but you got to have money to make that possible, to provide mental health experts and other opportunities for these athletes. So Nina, how do you balance those three?
Sure, it is. It's a challenge for sure. We're heavily reliant on philanthropic donations. We seek donors that are willing to give of their resources, again, to provide the student athlete experience. And here at Duke, we're so fortunate to have so many donors that are interested in providing those much needed dollars. Fans and seats. Last year with COVID, we really realized the impact of not having our fans in our venues and having that revenue stream, while the expense side was continuing to grow due to COVID expenses, and that it was extremely challenging. And we also constantly are looking for new revenue streams and where can we be kind of cutting edge and modern. We've got an NFT this weekend for the Duke Carolina game. It took our staff a few tries to kind of explain to me what it is that we were doing and how this was generating revenue. But it's those opportunities, looking for revenue where we can to again continue to provide for the student athlete experience.
Let me bring up an issue that is, when we're talking about the health and wellness and the development of student athletes, obviously that means for the majority of them that there is going to be a career after athletics. That's the NCAA's great advertisement, right? That only 1% is going to go pro. And so you're looking at business opportunities, and that brings us to the name, image, likeness policy that came into existence last summer. And I'm curious, it seemed to, on the one hand, be a wonderful opportunity to teach kids about business and promote themselves and market themselves. At the other hand, it was done sort of very quickly and without a lot of regulation and legislation, if you will, from the NCAA. What do you make of NIL and what it's done for your athletic programs and for the student athletes? Nina?
I love NIL. I think it's a great opportunity for our student athletes for the things that you just said, learning how to build your brand and, monetize your own name, image, and likeness. I think that's a good thing. Now, the unintended consequences, which honestly we could have seen coming as we prepared for July 1st last year to allow student athletes to monetize off of their NIL, that's been unfortunate. Seeing it turn into recruiting inducements and looking like like pay for play. Certainly not what NIL should be doing or was intended to do. But since we are operating under so many different state laws, so many different institutional policies, it is turning into a little bit of the Wild West. And so here at Duke, we're really focusing on educating our student athletes, educating our staff, especially our coaches, and making sure that they understand that this is not a recruiting inducement, and helping our student athletes learn about marketing and branding and all of the positive things that NIL should be. And so we've seen a significant amount of activity here at Duke, and our student athletes really are able to benefit from this in a really positive way. And I'm so glad that it's our female student athletes and our Olympic sports student athletes are really having just as much of a chance to benefit off their NIL as some of our football players and more high-profile student athletes. So all that said, NIL to me is a good thing. We just need to make sure that we wrap the guardrails around what could potentially be a disaster, and the train, unfortunately, is somewhat moving that way. So is it pushing for federal legislation so we can be on an even playing field? Not quite sure, but at this moment, with all of the different shapes, sizes, and colors, institutions, and rules, and laws, and policies, it's a little bit of a mess.
Yeah, I just the other day happened to be talking to a friend of mine who is a coach at a Big Five football school, and he said instead of going in and talking about what the school can offer, he basically said, okay, what's the starting point? What are we talking about? And, the family responded, well, it's $100,000. And then they've got to go back to the school and say, where do we find an NIL opportunity that reaches $100,000? And I'm guessing that was not the intended, if I understand what Ed O'Bannon and the other athletes wanted, they originally wanted just the NCAA to share some of the pie. And in fact, the NCAA isn't sharing anything. They basically just took the handcuffs off and said, go have at it. Go see what you can make. Is that how you see it, Kevin?
Along the lines of what Nina said, I'm a strong proponent of our student athletes being able to monetize their name, image, and likeness. I know in the Big Ten, we've been leaders in that area, but I'm also concerned about always the unintended consequences. Our schools have done an excellent job of educating our student athletes. And anytime you can talk to our student athletes and they're talking about branding and marketing and finance and taxes and insurance and all those different things, that's what I get excited about, because so few of our athletes across the country will play professionally or have an opportunity to compete in the Olympics. So I look at it from a learning standpoint. I agree, until we get some type of federal legislation that stabilizes the NIL environment and that really puts in strict guardrails, it will continue to be very difficult to manage, name, image, and likeness, because I'm concerned what you've already heard is that what you've alluded to, and Nina alluded to, is moving toward some form of pay for play and the recruiting inducements and all the different things that we all hear as far as people negotiating what they need to go to an institution. I don't think that was the basis for the development of name, image, and likeness, but I'm all for our student athletes having an opportunity to monetize their name, image, and likeness. I'm hopeful they're continuing to learn about the business elements, and most of all, that they're actually saving any of the money that they're earning, and because this is a good teaching moment, not only in the classroom, but really outside of the classroom, and what it will be like in the future. But we have to get some guardrails in place, because some of the stories that already that are floating around college athletics now are becoming extremely concerning. And one of the things that I'm concerned about is what will be the aftermath of this 3 to 5 to 7 years down the road for many of those student athletes who are at our institutions right now, but who 5 years down the road may not have had an opportunity to play professionally, and then have to look back. They're not in that phase anymore to be able to earn any name, image, and likeness dollars, and how do they continue on forward with their life in a strong fashion to be a productive citizen. So we're watching it very closely, and I hope we can get some federal legislation, but we do have to make some changes, because there have been some wonderful elements of it to start off with, but there also been some very concerning issues that have arisen even in this short period of time.
Would you say that it's not even a question of if now, but it's just when, since we are where we are, that it's really when college athletes are just going to get paid outright? Nina?
Oh, that makes me cringe, John.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah. You know, if we can keep introducing things like NIL and focus on how can we provide the maximum amount of benefits. You know, several years ago, we introduced cost of attendance, and that's been really beneficial to our student athletes, giving them some cash in their pockets to be able to fly home and to buy pizza late night and those types of things. And so if we can continue to evolve and find ways to provide student athletes with those types of resources, I think we'll be okay. But really, I am not a fan of pay for play at all, and really even moving towards that. I think there's potential to continue to provide resources for the student athlete experience without getting into pay for play.
To piggyback on this, because they sort of seem to go hand in hand, NIL is it's being used as a recruiting tool, and now the transfer portal, which seems to be, you know, again, the gates are open and everybody's flooding through it. What are your views on the benefits and the drawbacks? And this question in part comes from Christopher Hasbrook, who says, what do you see as the benefits and the drawbacks for the transfer portal, and how do you see that impacting not just competitive balance, but the economics of athletics as we go forward? Kev, you want to take that?
Mr. Moore.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I was a student athlete that transferred, so I'm not one of those individuals that think that you know, it will cause irreparable emotional and mental damage to someone who transfers. Sometimes there's time. I mean, my reason for transferring was the coach who recruited me across country from Arizona to Philadelphia left after my freshman year to go back to Arizona. So there are some reasons.
Right.
It's turned out fairly well for me. And so I'm a big believer that student athletes should be afforded the opportunity to transfer institutions. But just like name, image, and likeness, things need to be put in perspective. I am concerned about if just one little thing goes wrong with a student athlete that they say that, well, I'll just go into the transfer portal. And then you look at the number of student athletes who are in the transfer portal right now who have not found a place to really develop and to grow and to mature. So it's everything in life, I would say, is a balance. I want to make sure that our student athletes do have a chance to enter the transfer portal, to have an opportunity to play and recognize their dreams. But also the transfer portal has to be managed properly, because when you combine potential abuse of NIL, especially from a recruitment inducement package standpoint, in addition to individuals in the transport for portal, then you start approaching almost like free agency in professional sports, which is a concern. I think we always have to remind ourselves, John, that our young men and women on our campuses, they're young people. They're there to get an education. They're there to have an opportunity to grow and to learn and develop relationships that will last them for the rest of their lives. They will have plenty of enough time. If they're good enough, they'll play professionally or to be able to compete in the Olympics. But they'll have plenty enough time in their lives to worry about some major adult issues. And spending 21 years in the National Football League, there are absolutely wonderful benefits of being in professional sports. But you need to be mature enough to be able to handle those issues, not only for the individual athlete, but also for their families. And that takes time. So I'm always concerned and want to make sure that we create an environment on our campuses where our young people can have a chance to build relationships, to get a world-class education, to grow, to learn, to mature. So when they do get an opportunity, whenever that is, to play professionally or compete in the Olympics, that they're prepared to do it. And I just get concerned when I see some of our young student athletes coming on our campuses at 17 and 18 years old, 19 years old, and really rushing into that next phase of our lives. I look back and some of my greatest memories or experiences from college. And I just hope they have a chance to really recognize those memories, develop those memories, but most of all, to solidify an education, not just a diploma, but an education. And that's the difference, because it will be that education and those relationships that will help allow them to have a transformative and positive life for many, many years into the future.
If I hear you correctly, you want to more than just check the box next to the graduation rate. It can't just be about the optics of it. Nina, I want to go back to something that you said earlier when we were talking about revenue and creating more revenue streams and such. And this comes from Wallace Hayward, who sends in this question, which is, where is the incremental revenue growth going to come from for the Big Ten and the ACC over the next 5 years? And before you answer that, I want to just, I'm sort of a little bit of a tangent. I saw that the Chicago Cubs are trying to create the idea of streaming their games for people who have cut the cord, and Major League Baseball isn't so sure they like that idea that a team would go out on its own and do that. So, maybe that's a possibility. All of a sudden Duke says, wait, we've got the most popular basketball program in the country. Let's do it on our own. We don't need all these other partners, and we'll make the money. So where do you see the revenue growth coming from?
Sure. Well, I'll let Commissioner Warren speak to the revenue growth for a conference as a whole. And I will say there is no chance that Duke is going out on their own for a little while. I mean, we are all tied into the ACC and the television contract within the ACC, and grateful for that opportunity and what the ACC television contract provides us as an institution. So, institutionally, what sort of revenue opportunities are we looking for? What kind of new businesses can we get into? For us at Duke, is it concerts in some of our venues? Is it, like I had mentioned earlier, NFTs? So we're trying to look at new cutting edge type of things, and things that we haven't done here for a while at Duke to continue to grow revenue around hospitality, donor experiences, community events, and community experiences, and just making sure that we are utilizing the Duke asset and Duke athletics to continue to focus on how we grow revenue. And so I'll leave it to Commissioner Warren to kind of talk about more big picture at how a conference is looking at it. But within the ACC, we are a grateful institutional partner.
John,
Kevin,
one of the things, yeah, I mean, Nina's right on target. One of the things that I saw a unique opportunity when I joined the Big Ten 2 years ago was, one, to make sure that we solidify the relationship between the conference and our member institutions even more so. One of the concerns I have is that just from looking at our portfolio, and it's not only for our conference, which I'll speak to that, but probably other conferences, it seems our portfolios are somewhat unbalanced with the revenues that we get from our media network partners. I mean, we love all of our partners, and they've been the fuel to help power our conferences and our schools. But one of the things I'm really focused on is to make sure that we balance that portfolio and start developing relationships, not sponsorships, but real partnership activation. And that's one of the reasons why we launched our data analytics department, because for us to be able to tangibly and effectively build relationships with potential partners, we have to know more about them. The days of just going out and trying to sell a sign or put a logo on a wall or a floor, I mean, that may happen, but we need to move to the next phase of business, which really, and that starts with making sure that we know everything we possibly can about our existing fans, our past fans, but most of all, our future fans, and the way that we can engage them together. So it's a combination of data, analytics, innovation, partnership activation, creativity, working hand in hand, really being focused on the expense side of the ledger. So many times people are focused on we need more revenue, but you can't have your expenses outgrow your revenue. So it's an amalgamation of all those different elements, and even from an international component. So that's why you'll see a lot of the things that we're working on now in the Big Ten, announcements that we've already made from a data analytics standpoint, but other announcements that you'll see here coming forward. I'm a big believer in also bringing as many of these opportunities in-house and making sure that we limit the amount of individuals in and around what we do on a daily basis to build their businesses, but to make sure we do it here from a Big Ten standpoint, and also to own those businesses and to create businesses at the Big Ten Conference with our member institutions that we actually can take to market to be able to provide those services from a greater good standpoint. So this is what I'm excited about, and also really leaning into our media partner relationships. So growing those, but now starting to develop opportunities here at the collegiate level. And so that's where we'll be focusing our energies over the next couple years.
Give me a little license to use a word that's probably, to quote Nina, is going to make you cringe, as she said earlier. But let me use the word leverage. And is that part of your thinking behind the alliance that the Big Ten has formed with the ACC and the Pac-12, and that you got to play a little bit of catch up with what the SEC is doing? Football has made them king, and the money is rolling in. And you obviously have good football schools. Is that part of it, creating this partnership that you can then go to the media outlets and say, we're just as big? All of our conferences are just as big as the SEC, and you got to pay for it.
I've never really looked at, my total focus, John, is really on the Big Ten. And, from initially, but then also focusing on what's the best interest of college athletics, generally speaking. As we started off at the top of this discussion, we're in a period now of transformation and transition. When we come out of this period, whether it's in the next year, 3 years, or 5 years, it will not look the same as it did 5 years ago. It'll still have some of the core basic tenets of it, but just from your question as far as leverage, I don't really view the alliance from that standpoint. I looked at it as schools who are like-minded, from an academic and athletic standpoint, and for us to work together. But we all have to work together. We work together with the Big 12. We work together, with the SEC. I don't look at this from a competition standpoint. I'm very pleased where we are. I'm very pleased with our schools, but I am on a daily basis looking for ways for us to professionally and elegantly grow the Big Ten brand, provide opportunities for our student athletes that they have not had before, make us incredibly strong financially, not only in the short term, but for the long term, and to look over the horizon and start developing relationships with companies that others have not done, and to start to explore, areas for at the collegiate and conference level that have really not been thought about or discussed. So that's really my focus every day, and has been a blessing to work with all of the other A5 commissioners, and it is a true blessing for some of the things that we've been able to do with the alliance with the ACC and the Pac-12, and primarily from a mental health and wellness standpoint, from a gender equality standpoint. And my whole focus is to make sure we do everything that we can to keep college athletics stabilized, but then also, back to what Nina said and what I said at the top of our time together, make sure that we keep our student athletes at the center of all of our decision-making process.
So let me, you mentioned looking at the landscape, it's going to look different 5 years from now, certainly 10 years from now. And maybe this would be the way to wrap things up, but we're not there yet. But I'm going to date myself here when, back in the mid 80s, and I had the occasion to meet with Jimmy Valvano, who was then at NC State, and he said, what's going to happen one day is the big schools are just going to break away from the NCAA. It was sort of maybe more novel in '86 to say it. Today, you can hear people chanting that. Nina, you just said that Duke's not running away from the ACC, but is there going to come a time in 5 years, are we going to look ahead and we're going to see that the bigger schools, particularly those that are dominant in certain sports, are going to pull away? Who's going to be making the decisions? Who's going to be shaping college athletics 5 years, 10 years down the road? Is the NCAA still going to be running the show, or is it going to be commissioners of the big conferences or the athletic directors at the individual schools? Nina?
Yeah, what a great question. It's interesting to think about. And again, several years ago, we moved towards the autonomy conferences and calling the Big Five the autonomy conferences, and changing the NCAA governance structure a bit to allow for those Big Five, Power Five conferences to have almost a separate set of rules and rules that will help them stay competitive with each other amongst the Power Five, and really acknowledging that the Power Five, Division I institutions with big time football, if you will, are the more heavily resourced institutions providing those experiences for their student athletes. And so we saw that move towards just trying almost a break off, but not really. I mean, we're still encapsulated in the NCAA governance structure. I don't know, this might be a good question for Commissioner Warren on if the institutions will break off into their own organization. I don't know that there's an appetite for that. I think it's really important that at this moment in time, we are engaged in transforming the NCAA. I mean, the NCAA is almost in a little bit of an identity crisis. Who are we as an organization? What are our goals? What is the mission of the NCAA? And so I'm really grateful that we are working through this transformation process so that at the end of the day, we can come out with, here's what the NCAA is charged with doing. Is it providing elite championships for all of our sports? Is it governance and enforcement? And so we'll come out of the transformation committee with some really well-defined stated goals, and hopefully we all kind of stay together in an organization, but while recognizing that, again, we're all different shapes, sizes, and colors, and the rules are really difficult to apply to 1,100 institutions across the country, competing across divisions 1, 2, and 3, and different budget sizes and all of that. So, I don't think that we are moving towards a break off, but I'm certainly happy that we are recognizing that we are, different institutions kind of competing again for the same values and educational experience for our student athletes.
You're also competing for the same dollar, essentially. There's a limited number of dollars to go around from your media partners, from outside marketing and sponsor opportunities, NIL opportunities for the athletes and such. In a way, they're competing against themselves. But let me turn to one of our online guests, Don Johnson, who mentions that the economics of football are now creating such a disparity that it is impossible. Is it possible for the smaller schools, or even a Duke, where basketball is what you are considered? You're considered a basketball school as opposed to a football school, like an Alabama or even a Michigan, or a Clemson. Nina, when you came into this job not too long ago, did you say to yourself, wow, football's king, and if we want the cash, basketball's good, but we got to step it up in football because that's the future?
100%. You hit the nail on the head. We recognize the importance, the value of football, and the need to be a competitive football institution. And so hopefully before long, John, we're saying Duke is not just a basketball school, but a football and 26 other sport school as well. But we do recognize the need to be competitive in football. We don't want to be sitting at the table and being a taker at the ACC level. So we did recognize, and I'm so grateful for the leadership and support and guidance from our President Vincent Price, in recognizing how important football is to our success as an athletics program here.
Kevin, let me come back to you on an issue that we've sort of touched on, but I want to follow up on, and this comes from Angela Miles online, which the question is how would you set up a collegiate system that is fair to the students who are generating huge amounts of revenue for these schools and universities and allowing them to make the money? Can you name a couple specific ideas? If you don't want to pay them, how are you going to compensate them?
Well, I think we've talked about it. We're starting to deal with a lot of these, issues now, with name, image, and likeness. As Nina said, I mean, it moved to autonomy, then cost of attendance and NIL. There are other things that have been done. But again, I go back to, from a holistic standpoint, professional sports is there. And one thing I found, as I said, being in the NFL for 21 years, regardless of where you go to school, if you're good enough to play in the NFL, you'll get noticed and you'll have an opportunity to do it. So I just want to make sure that we're not making decisions now because of the pressurization of making sure that we're trying to get to pay for play. We need to keep our basic tenets in mind that our colleges and universities exist for us to provide an environment, especially in college athletics, for young men and women to be able to participate at the highest possible level, to compete for championships, to learn, to grow, but most of all, to get a world-class education. And I think that's important. So regardless of where NIL goes and the guardrails and all these other items that are on the desk of individuals like Nina and myself, of college football playoff expansion and pay for play, and our student athletes considered, employees, and the transformation committee, all these different things, the things we have to keep in mind is that we need to make sure that not a day goes by that one of our student athletes on our campuses feel that their focus should be on playing sports and not focusing on their education. They're gifted, they're talented, and we should create that environment. It's enjoyable to watch them perform, but we need to make sure that if we have individuals in our athletic departments that want to go on to be doctors, that we structure our environments, whether that's structuring practices or travel, to make sure that they can take organic chemistry and biology and participate in the labs. So I was fortunate during college that I had coaches and I had athletic directors and I had administrators that knew that I was not going to play professional basketball, but I would hopefully have a career in sports. So they made sure to look out for me and whatever classes I needed to take, that it worked, if that meant even moving our practice time. So I think, John, we have an opportunity to look over the horizon and say, what does college athletics look like 1, 3, 7, 10, 20 years from now? But to make sure at the end of the day that when we look every one of our parents, every one of our student athletes in the eye, when they come back on our campuses, that we're proud that we are providing them with an opportunity, encouraging them to get their education, to be more than they can be. And if their dream is fulfilled, that they play professionally, God bless them. If they win gold medals, God bless them. But so many of our student athletes don't get an opportunity to do that. And we need to make sure that we equip them with the services. So every day when I'm focusing on our media rights agreements and growing those, or partnership activation or data analytics, it's not just to make more money for the conference, it's to make money to provide us and our member institutions to be able to provide special opportunities. We're taking 100 people from the Big Ten Conference this summer to Selma and Montgomery, Alabama, to walk the Edmund Pettus Bridge, to tour museums, to talk about issues pertaining to civil rights. What happened on Bloody Sunday? I don't want any of our student athletes on our campuses that 5 years down the road, someone brings up a discussion on Bloody Sunday and they say, what was that? I want them to be educated. So I want to make sure that we morph that classroom, even classroom education experience, to these type of trips. We're going to do something next year for the 50th anniversary of Title IX, and then we'll go to the Holocaust Museum and the African American Museum of Natural History. We've started this Big Life series, this field trip, but that takes resources to do, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm focusing on making sure that we have the proper, revenues to provide those experiences for our student athletes. So many times people think if you have a problem or an issue, you throw more money at it and it goes away. But spending 21 years in professional athletics, I've seen that sometimes that can even create more issues. So I'm very sensitive of the fact that money does not always solve issues, and we need to make sure we do it in the right format. But we have to make sure we keep in mind that every one of our student athletes, whether you're at Duke or whether you're at a school in the ACC or the SEC or Pac-12 or Big 12 or the Big 10 or any other school, that we want those student athletes to have the same experience that our son or daughter would have.
So you've led me into a nice place, I think, because you talk about you can't just throw money at a problem and solve it, but you're also concerned about having revenue. And if I can speak on behalf of students who might say, well, you've got the revenue to compensate us as we generate revenue for you, and you even have revenue to conduct these sorts of programs that you're talking about, Kevin, if you didn't spend $100 million paying Mel Tucker to be the football coach at Michigan State for the next 10 years, if Coach Saban wasn't making $9 million a year, if Coach Kelly wasn't making close to $100 million over the next 10 years at LSU, if schools now, over the last decade, have spent more than $500 million on dead contracts for football coaches, men's basketball and women's basketball coaches who no longer are employed at the majority of state university schools. More than $500 million. So don't the student athletes have a gripe, a reasonable gripe, when they say, there's money, you're just misappropriating it? Nina?
Yeah, well, but go ahead, Nina.
No,
Go
go
ahead.
No, I was going to say, as Nina
Nina's
talked
like,
about the
all
education at Duke University, you're talking about $80,000 a year. One of the things I would challenge you to do is to go back and look at when you have a successful athletic program, look at the applications, look at the attendance that causes individuals to come to school. You can even go back all the way to Villanova with Raleigh Massimino in the 80s. And when they had their run with Ed Pinckney and were able to morph into a great basketball program, or Georgetown under John Thompson, or what Duke has been able to do. Go back and study the impact that those successful athletic programs have not only had for the institution, for the conference, but for college athletics. So it's very easy to cherry pick a coach here, a coach there, but I would recommend that you look at it from a holistic standpoint. And that's why we're going through a transformation right now. You know, that, as Nina alluded to, as I've talked about, that's why we're sitting down and looking at what can be done differently with the NCAA. I know I spend many hours a day thinking about what does this entity that we call college athletics really look like? What's the proper way to do it? What it should be the rules of engagement internally, externally with our student athletes. And the good thing about it is we're talking about it. There were so many years that went by that it was taboo that we really shouldn't even discuss name, image, and likeness or pay for play and all those different things. I don't have all the answers, but I'm excited about having partners like Nina and Jim Phillips, who's the commissioner of the ACC, and Greg Sankey at the SEC, and George Kay at the Pac-12, and Bob Bosley at the Big 12, and others, leaders across the country, because these are things that we're spending a lot of time, energy, and effort. And fortunately, we have an opportunity now to really help design, shape, and really redesign and reshape what college athletics should look like and what will be the format for the best interest of our student athletes.
So to that point, Nina, go ahead, please follow up.
I was just going to say, I just want to kind of build on our specific situation here at Duke, and I mentioned the $80,000 sticker price. About 5 years ago, we did a study here and just tried to understand the value of a full scholarship. So, we put dollars to the tutoring that we provide and the athletic medicine services and doctors that we provide, just kind of everything that a student athlete receives, benefits, resources from the athletic department. So the value of a full scholarship 4-year student athlete, now this was several years ago, was $500,000. And that's pretty hefty. It took me a while to pay off my student loans from undergrad and then law school. And so, I think that gets lost in the messaging a lot. The headlines are coaches' salaries and, the exorbitant amounts of money that we're spending on running these athletic programs. But, it really comes down to, and as Kevin has mentioned, the academic experience and what our student athletes are, the benefits that they're receiving while they're here, and then really how we're preparing them to go out and become global change-making citizens after they graduate from their respective institutions. And so, when we talk about money, I really think we as college athletics administrators need to do a better job talking about the value of a student athlete's education that they're receiving while they're here.
And John, one of the other things that's important for us to start unpacking is the disparity of graduation rates for people of color. And one of the things, and I say it a lot to our student athletes, and maybe they didn't think I was serious at first, but they believe me now, that I expect that one of our Big Ten student athletes now will be president of the United States. And when I talk to a lot of our student athletes, I want to talk to them about as much as playing in professional sports or winning gold medals, as much as I do about them going to run a Fortune 100 company, or being a woman CEO like Shelly Ibach at Sleep Number, or being commissioners, or starting businesses. And so I just want to really provide that environment where we're having those discussions with them, where we're dealing with issues of social justice and gender inequality, and what can I do in my position that during my tenure here, that we do have a president of the United States come out of the Big Ten Conference who was a student athlete, and that we do have 20, 30, 40 CEOs on Wall Street that were trained at our institutions. That's what I really want to focus on. And we have world-class doctors and lawyers and educators and teachers and astronauts, all those different kind of things. So, and because our student athletes are gifted all across the country, they're talented, the schedules that they have to keep up with, the demands, all the things that they go through, we should be focusing on them is what can we do to put them in a position that if they're blessed to go to play professionally, wonderful. But what are they going to do when their career ends, whether 1, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line? And if they're blessed to go win gold medals, great. But what are they going to do when they retire? But to create an environment to train them to be able to be leaders in the world that they so rightly deserve.
So you want another Gerald Ford, is what you want. Let me.
Can we say the next president's coming from Big Ten or ACC?
Yeah, Big Ten and ACC dual degree, undergrad and graduate.
There we go.
Let me touch on two things, because I know we're running out of time and you've been so gracious to give us so much of your time and your insight and expertise. Two things that I want to hit on really quickly, because you talked about the holistic treatment of the athletes and getting them the education so they can go out in the world. Mental health is such an important component of all of this. The demands, as you said, Kevin, are so great on these athletes. They basically got two full-time jobs, their athletics and their academics. So Nina, how do you figure out and prioritize mental health, particularly coming off the last 2 years with COVID?
Yes, another challenge, and especially, I mean, the importance of providing mental health resources was certainly brought to light during the pandemic. Again, it's keeping our student athletes' health, safety, and welfare top of mind. It's a critical priority, non-negotiable, and so we need to make sure that we are focusing on providing them the resources that they need to be successful while they're here. And mental health is just such an important aspect of a college student's experience while they're here. And so, we're seeing where college athletic departments are certainly providing more resources in that regard, and which is really a great thing. We are talking about it more. We've got great mental health awareness initiatives, as Kevin had mentioned, within the Alliance. And so we are really making sure that we are providing those resources at every level, institutionally, conference. The NCAA is also focusing on mental health initiatives. And so it is really, I mean, we would do our student athletes an injustice if we did not help them in that regard. It's been a challenging 2 years. And thank goodness we are coming out of hopefully coming out of this pandemic. And our student athletes are really resilient and they are have survived a really tough time. But we need to make sure that we don't say, okay, done, and now we're moving on and good luck competing and with your time demands and everything you have going on as a student athlete. We need to keep our foot on the gas relative to mental health resources providing for our student athletes.
Do you have the money?
I'm so passionate. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please. All yours.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm so passionate about mental health. Nina is right on point. I'm so proud to have the ACC as a partner in the Alliance. And I'll put it into context. We started our mental health and wellness cabinet 2 years ago from a Big Ten standpoint. We worked out a partnership with Calm, the app. I used it this morning for meditation early this morning. ACC also has it. We've had over 600,000 total sessions on the Calm app, because we provide it to all of our student athletes and coaches and everyone in our conference. But we really need to focus as a society on the community, but especially in college athletics, and put our energy toward destigmatizing mental health, make it a priority. We have a mental health and wellness cabinet. We have representatives from each one of our institutions. By even talking about mental health and wellness, we now have more therapists on our campuses to be able to deal with these issues. I'm passionate about it because at age 11 and a half, I was run over by a car, was in traction, was in a body cast, And out of all the surgeries and great doctors that helped me get me physically back to health, not one time did I have one session about someone asked me about how I was doing, from a mental health standpoint. I was struggling. I didn't know if I even wanted to live anymore, sitting in that body cast, as basically a young boy, in my bedroom. So I had to rewire my brain. I don't want our student athletes to go through that. I want them to feel safe, to be able to talk about it on campus. We have too many suicides that occur on our campus. Our student athletes are struggling. I watched, 3 incredible Big Ten basketball games last night. And then I took a step back before I said my prayers and went to bed. I said, some of those players on that court are 18 years old. And they're playing on national TV, trying to get their team into the tournament to win a championship. They're NBA scouts there. They got pressures from home. And oh, by the way, they might have a test this morning or a paper due. So one of the things we need to do is, even with all of the rhetoric that's going on in college athletics and all the agreements that we're working on and the great business things we're doing, we need to make sure that these are someone's sons and daughters. I have a son who's playing football in the Big Ten right now in Michigan State. So I know what he goes through. I know what his teammates go through. And I want to make sure I'm doing everything I possibly can for not only our Big Ten student athletes, but our student athletes around the country, because they are so talented and special that they know that we love them, we appreciate them, we respect them, they're protected, and we have each and every resource for them to be able to live a great life while they're in college, but to also, when they graduate, to understand that mental health should be treated the same way if one of them tore their ACL. So I'm honored to have Nina as a partner in this area. We're passionate about it in the Big Ten. I know the ACC is passionate about it, and it's been great being able to work with them and the other Alliance members to bring mental health issues to the forefront.
I appreciate all of that because I know how important it is. And so I don't want to just sort of kiss and run off to the next thing. So you forgive me, but I know we're running out of time here. I'd be remiss if I let you go without talking about what is now the elephant in the room, or sort of taking over the room, which is sports gambling. You look at other streams of revenue. We've documented on HBO what it's going to mean to the NFL and some of the other professional leagues. New York State apparently saw $1.7 billion in gambling just in January alone. I know it was the NFL playoffs. Do you see that as a big boost for college athletics, or does it scare you, Nina?
I was hoping you would start with Kevin on this one. Yeah, it does scare me, but it's here. And so, we need to understand within college athletics how we live with sports gambling being legal, keeping our student athletes protected as we move around the country and compete, and making sure they're educated and aware as to the issues surrounding sports gambling. And so it's the genie is out of the bottle, or the toothpaste is out of the tube on that one. And we're really focusing our attention now on education.
Nina's 100%
Kevin, does it scare
correct.
you?
I don't know if scare is the right word. That's a word I've taken out of my vernacular. It's here, and it's been here. It's been here for years. So you have to go back and look at some of the issues that have taken place in college athletics literally for the last 80 years. I mean, it's been here. And so it's something that we need to make sure we become educated about, learn about, educate our student athletes about, and deal with. So that's another folder on my desk that I'm exploring and looking at and trying to learn about, because it's here. And there are some of our institutions in college athletic generally, I mean, you're aware of them, that have had these, scandals that aren't good for anyone. But it's no different than alcohol and other items that are in and around us every day. We need to learn about it and become educated about it. So that's one of the exciting things about the things that Nina and myself get to do every day, is to learn about these fascinating areas and how we can incorporate those into daily living and make sure that we're equipped to be able to deal with them in a proper manner. So thank you for that question.
I really wish I could go on and on here with you, but I know you guys have both given us your time. Nina, I know you also have another challenge in front of you, and I'm sort of tipping my hat to you because I know some of the Duke alums who are listening in. You've got to transition from Coach K to Jon Scheyer, and so not only do you have to push forward with football, but you got to protect the brand that you've already got and hope that you don't lose what you've got there. But Nina King from Duke University and Kevin Warren, Commissioner of the Big Ten, really my pleasure to sit with you and spend an hour talking about these issues. And I wish you the best of luck and all the challenges that you face going forward. David, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay. Jon, thank you so much for leading just a wonderful, provocative discussion. And Nina and Kevin, really, really great, candid, head-on discussion about the pressing issues facing collegiate athletics.